the meeting of the Hearings and Engagement Committee. Declare that open. I just first of all want to acknowledge the apologies of Her Worship the Mayor Paula Southgate, Councillors O'Leary, Councillor Naidu Rolfe, Councillor Forsyth, Councillor Bunting, and also just have a minute note that Mangai Oliti Ua expresses his regret at not being able to attend today. Are there any other apologies that we're aware of? So I hope I haven't missed an email because people have email. Right, I move the apologies. Sustained, seconded, Deputy Chair.
Colleague Sarah has joined us.
Sarah, that is from the Claudelands Forest. That's good. That's excellent. Thank you. Right, that is move. All those in favour, all those contrary, carried. We now move to the confirmation of the agenda. As I understand it, is as tabled. Amy? Right. Move that the agenda, seconded Councillor Wilson. All those in favour, those contrary, carried. Do we have any declaration of interest that says not required?
Not required to have a mover or a seconder if anybody.
All right. Okay. I'll just probably make a note that with regard to some items relating, as I understand it, to Palmerston Street and a small part of Anglesey Street, I was formerly resident in Anglesey Street. I do have a property interest in that area, but I don't believe that in any way unduly conflicts me, except that I have probably a finite overview of that area, but I'm not directly conflicted, but I will just have that noted for obvious reasons. Right, are there any other further declarations? We now go to the confirmation of the Hearings and Engagement Committee open minutes, which is on page 5. It is moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded, we'd have to check who was there. You were there, Maxine? Yeah, seconded Councillor Van Easton. That was the Zoom, yeah. Oh no, that was the Gardens, sorry, I beg your pardon. It is the quite comprehensive day we had. Is there any discussion, any matters? Or I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those to the contrary, it is carried. Confirmation of hearings and the minutes of the 26th of August. Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Sarah Thompson, who was there. You were happy to second? And I'll just go that was essentially traffic related. Any discussion? All those in favour will say aye. Those to the contrary say no. That is carried. We now go to the traffic item 7, as I understand it, the traffic parking regulations and traffic bylaw changes, page 16. Invite Robin Denton. I understand we have had a written submission on that, and I'm wondering if you could obviously just deal with that in the context of your report to us.
Apologies, my machine's just gone back to sleep again. Okay. So item 6, which is the parking and traffic bylaw changes. So I'll take the report as being read. The key points for discussion as a result of the consultation. So in Glenlyn Ave, so the corner of Glenlyn and River Road, so this is clause 12 of the report.
And on the appendix, could you perhaps just give us the page where I think there's a photo descriptor? Where would that be?
is on page 28
Oh, yeah, I've got it here, that's
in the pictures.
right.
So in Glen Lynn, there has been completion of two-bedroom duplexes on the corner.
Well, that's page 20, is it? Page 20 of your report? Photo?
28 is
28.
got the photo.
Right, okay.
And so there's been some expressions of difficulty with getting in and out of there with parked vehicles. So we have done the consultation through there. At the time of writing the report, we had received feedback from several of the residents in the new duplexes, and we had also received feedback from the folks opposite on the, if we're looking at the picture on the right hand side. And since that point in time, we've also received further confirmation from one more resident in the duplex, and we have also received a further email from the folks at the duplex number 1/1, expressing their concern about needing to be able to park within close proximity of their property due to a vehicle receiving a broken side window while parked outside. So they sent through a picture of that. So we had one person against, one property against, and this was the one that has subsequently suffered the damage to the vehicle, and therefore we're not in support of the no stopping going ahead. So that's it for Glen Lynn.
Councillor Pascoe.
Chair, yeah, there is parking on site at both the duplexes, if my memory serves me right. There's garaging and parking in front of the garaging.
Correct.
And buses also pull in and come out of Glen Lynn Avenue on rather frequently in my observations.
Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
so that particular area is it because the complainant, sorry, the duplex occupier has more than the two cars that would comfortably fit on the site?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is, and if I could just ask the question a little further, this is potentially likely to be a significant problem because it is infill housing there. There was one house on that property and now there's two duplexes. Mm-hmm. This is really the signalling, isn't it, of likely effects of infill housing where there are multiple vehicles going forward.
Yes, yeah. This is basically a situation that we are encountering more and more throughout the city as infill occurs.
So is there a more efficient way of handling this rather than waiting for complaints? Could we, is a likely bylaw a probable outcome as we see more and more of this happening, and this is in residential sites rather than in the inner city?
So I think we still probably stuck with working on a case-by-case basis as issues occur. Right. There's a lot of infill that happens and we don't have any problems. Mm-hmm. We're trying to minimise the amount of no stopping that we're putting around the city. Having vehicles parked on streets generally is a really good traffic management. It helps contain speeds. Yep. So it's a matter of working through those locations where that parking is creating an issue, and this is primarily an issue because of its proximity to that corner. Yep. Having that central island in Glen Lynn, meaning that vehicles just can't get in and out safely. And
Glen Lynn, I think, is a bit of a rat run too for cars wanting to get from River Road across to Hokanui Road.
Road, yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Chair.
You're going to obviously, as I understand, the external submission is related to Hartley Street, is that right? But you'll cover Correct. That in your normal, okay?
Yes.
Right,
so if everyone's happy with that, I'll move on to Allycott Road.
Sorry, Councillor Thompson.
I'm Thank you, Robin. I was just wanting to confirm, you mentioned in the report there was parking on River Road. Is that directly outside of the number 1/1?
Yes,
Perfect. Okay, and are there other options a little bit further down Glenlyn as well for parking?
correct.
Okay, so from what you can see, there is other options ultimately for reasonable options
Yes,
that
I guess,
are generally available.
yes, the resident who was against the parking had noted that they did have a security camera operating, and that was why they wanted to park their vehicle within close proximity so that they could observe that.
Okay, all right, thank you, Robin.
Robin, carry on.
Thank you, Chair.
Cheers.
Councillor Ewan?
Oh, sorry, councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. My question relates to Palmerston Street and Anglesey Street.
I'm going to come to that. I'll work through that.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
If you're happy with, I'll just carry on working through the
Sure.
report. Yeah, okay. So for Allycott Road, this is actually a location that we have come to the committee before, and it's a series of car parks outside a little corner dairy, and had previously had hairdresser, etc. And one of the stops had been made into a limited time restricted park for 10 minutes. Now that the hairdresser has gone, the dairy owner has asked that the other two car parks in that location be changed to P10 as well, primarily to service their customers. We did have one objection, which was from the next door neighbour at number 75, which where there's redevelopment happening at the moment, some more infill. But at this stage, staff are still recommending that those car parks are intended for the use of that little shopping
Yes.
area,
Yes.
and that is appropriate to respond to their requests. So we are recommending the proposed restrictions proceed on that one. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are on that particular
Yeah,
item.
so yeah, I'll have a look round. If there's no questions, we just move on. That's fine. Thanks.
Okay. So the other item, which is just an amendment to the current report, is as a result of a review of the proposed restrictions that we had put through the report for Palmerston Street and Anglesey Street. So this is the southern section of Anglesey Street that is south of Anzac Parade, past the Countdown, and then around the corner into Palmerston Street. So that site is currently got roadworks happening on it at the moment. So the Infrastructure Alliance are completing a full pavement rehabilitation project, and as part of that we've worked with them and are looking at a number of minor safety improvements to improve the ability for people to get across the road and general walking and cycling. So there were a number of no stopping restrictions proposed and changes to bus stops in that length. As a result of a couple of inquiries since the report was written, we've gone back and had another good look at that, and we believe that we can probably reduce the amount of no stopping that was being proposed, and overall end up with a net loss of only 4 car parks in that greater scheme. And that was primarily because recognising again that having some parked cars through the area helps manage those speeds, that where the parking has been and was proposed to be removed, we haven't actually had any complaints or issues, so there didn't seem to be a good reason to change it, especially given that we're looking at some lower speeds through there. And once the work's completed, we can always come back and have another good look at it and make sure that it's working as we want.
So I have two questions, and I understand Councillor Wilson,
Yes.
and obviously having lived in the area, but this relates to the bigger, with our national policy statement in terms of apartments, potentially with no, off-street car parking, and the reality of that area being, or any area being quite high density. So the unintended consequences of cars up on the grass verges, you know, weekends at night, whatever. I guess moving forward, there's going to be a number of other Palmerston Street, you know, as we move forward, because I know what you're obviously trying to do, but how conscious are you for apartments, literally, if they have a second car or even one car moving forward, they need to park on the street?
Yes, and this is going to be the ongoing pressure that we have. And as I indicated, Councillor Rob, I don't think that there's a simple blanket approach that we can put to this, even in advance of these developments going ahead. We have to deal with it case by case, and we continue to monitor.
The second question, help me, because there's two bits to this. There's the actual budget programming of street works as we roll it out, which is sort of through presumably the infrastructure committee, you know, operational policy. We are dealing, if you like, with a consequential thing. And what I just want to work out in my own head, if hypothetically, we said no, we're not going to approve any of these, you know, no stopping, how would that impact on the work that is being undertaken?
It's primarily around safety, as far as where we're proposing the new raised platform across Palmerston Street. And the other one is a change to the bus stop. So by putting the improved pedestrian facility in Anglesey Street, we're proposing to relocate the bus stop. The bus stop currently is a pull-in area, which at the time of that being built was considered to be the best thing to do. As our traffic volumes have increased, actually it makes it more and more difficult for the bus to get back out into the stream of traffic. So they prefer not to actually have that indented parking. So we're removing that, and we're also putting them on the other side of the crossing, the northern side of the crossing, which makes it easier for them to get away afterwards and means that pedestrians are safe when they're crossing.
Sure, thank you. Deputy Chair Wilson?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Martin. Look, I actually really support these no stopping areas. I used to, and my wife used to take our lives into our own hands every time trying to come out of Hammond Street, because cars would park along Palmerston and your visual optics was zero. My question is, that bus stop looks just a tad close to that intersection still, because a bus will block all visual reference from traffic coming from Anglesey and along. We're really comfortable.
Yes, so these bus stops are not what we call timing points. So literally the bus will only stop if there is somebody to drop off or pick up.
Right.
So there will be times where literally the buses are not stopping. And furthermore, that they don't have high numbers of people getting on and off, so that they will only be stopped for short amount of time. And with the B card in operation now, it's quicker for people to get on because they're not playing with cash and having to work that out with the driver. So people are able to get on and off quite quickly.
So thank you. Can I ask, just in regards to the current construction of a significant set of apartments on the corner of Palmerston and Manning?
Yes.
So the house is gone and they're going up rapidly. So I see we're certainly putting in that no stopping around that corner. But I wonder if we've gone far enough in light of the current construction that's likely to be finished in the next 4 or 5 months. And I think from memory, is it 6 or 8 new apartments that are going in that used to be one house? And Manning was already a bit of a nightmare, if I recall. I think you and I spoke about a couple of complaints already on Manning. Just your update. So I guess what I'm asking is this is this current solution to the problem have you included the new apartments in your thinking?
No, we haven't, but it's our intention once the work is built. So a standard process for these sorts of works is to go back and do a road safety audit once it's all built.
Right.
And that's where we're going to do a further assessment and make sure that everything's, working as we wish. And we are aware of the increasing development. So it is something that we can come back and do additional changes. We'd rather, I guess, go in with a light hand, and then we can continue to put in more restrictions as we need to. It's always a pain to try and remove yellow paint if you put it down. So if we start a little light, and then we can add to that. And as I said, we will be keeping an eye on these areas just because we know that there's a lot happening.
Because they will be finished before, Mr. Chair, I think they will be finished before Christmas. They are going up at this amazing rate.
Yes, yeah. So we'll have our road safety audit sort of being undertaken in around that time.
All right, I'll leave the rest for the debate, but thank you.
And a supplementary question, obviously, the flow on, and I've just picked up the one issue around the parking at night on Grassfoot, the flow on around neighbouring streets.
Yes.
And can you just confirm that once it's all in place, you'll even some after-hours visits to the area just to see if there's been some consequential inappropriate parking and that kind of stuff?
Yes, so we do have the automatic number plate recognition car set up for parking, and because this is in the sort of hospital precinct, that is something that we do on a semi-regular basis. So we'll be certainly looking to go out and have another good look at that. The hospital area is one that, a lot of our areas settled when we had COVID restrictions because there weren't as many people travelling, but the hospital area is one that hasn't lightened off at all.
And I think just parking even on grass verges after hours, I'd be arguing that probably some education or to discourage it. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Robin, a couple of questions. One is, do we often have commuters parking along Palmerston Street, kind of taking up some of these spaces?
It is probable that we do. I think that they probably are commuters who are related to the hospital as much as potentially commuters who are working in the south end of the central business district. But we also know that there's, the tennis courts and various other activities through there. It's got quite a lot of activities as well as residential in Palmerston. So there is ongoing need for parking or demand for parking.
Okay, because I guess I was wondering whether it's an area where it's suitable for residential kind of parking or an assessment of also, you mentioned tennis courts, kind of how we balance those two, but ensure that, if there are commuters parking there, that we kind of identify that.
So yes, the AMPR car that runs around can help with that. I guess the workshop that we had with elected members a little while ago, looking at sort of the more operational components of parking, we talked about residential parking schemes. So that's an area that we need to do some more work on. And the hospital area will obviously be one that's very ripe for consideration. Not only, though, does it have commuter parking demands from the hospital and potentially the CBD, we've obviously got all the infill happening, and so there's a residential demand, but we also have schools and kindies in the area, which also create some peak demands when people are coming and going from school. So it's certainly got a lot of different activities in the area, and that, I guess, is the challenge moving forward, that even with a residential parking scheme, we are still going to have to look at how we cater for those different demands, which are, above and beyond just the residents getting to and from their homes.
Okay, sounds complex.
Yes.
And the other question was, in regard to the courtesy crossings versus pedestrian crossings, I guess, what feedback have you had from the community around the use of courtesy crossings, particularly in areas for people with mobility issues or in areas with a lot of people walking and stuff. Because I had some feedback around some issues with the Te Aroha Grey Street roundabout, and I guess people finding it challenging sometimes still to cross with those courtesy crossings.
Yes, it is. It's again a bit of a case-by-case basis. Certainly with the raised platforms that we're putting in, the courtesy ones are still a lot easier than what they've had previously, just because the speeds are managed, and for anyone who's got a wheelchair or pushchair, those sorts of things, they're not having to negotiate the dip and the curb and that sort of thing, which also slows you down. And sort of makes it take longer to get across the road. I'm just double checking because I think in Palmerston, I can get to the right picture. I think there was actually an intention to have a zebra crossing proposed. Yes, so that's actually a zebra crossing. And that's as a result of the consultation we did, because there are a high number of people with mobility issues in this area, and that's related to some of the associated businesses and that sort of thing in that area. So yes, it is. We do try and look at the numbers, who's out there. There's always the ability to retrofit zebra crossings on top of the raised safety platforms in the future if we need to.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Eva Lisa, General Manager, I assume that whole issue, just correct me, I think that issue of parking and, residential parking permits management, that would be the subject of a report eventually from Robin to the Infrastructure Committee. Have I got that right?
Yes, correct, and it's also part of the conversations regarding the district plan and the MPS.
Yes.
I always get it wrong. Urban
National
design.
policy.
Yeah, national policy statement that Luca Dwyer's planned, and so that was the ongoing conversation to keep that the residential parking and how we deal with parking and infill issues for the future.
Fine, thank you. Are there any further questions on Palmerston Street? Councillor Van Oosten?
Just one. Thanks, Robin, for your answers around there and for providing us with the scoping of the road. It's my understanding that the road isn't going to become any wider, but that the footpaths will be improved for other modes of transport. Is that correct?
Yes, so we're trying to do a general tidy up there, and certainly when it comes to a lot of the side roads, we're putting those raised safety platforms across them, and that requires us to realign footpaths and get them all sort of tidied up as well.
And that you talked about the complexity with schools, businesses, tennis courts. There's a retirement village also in that mix. I know this because my father is a resident. And in terms of the parking, have we received any feedback from them about the ease or not to be able to access that road from Palmerston Street? Because that's their main entrance.
They come in through Faux Street, yes.
Right.
So that's the back entrance. And Faux Street's also a very busy street for the school. So we've been certainly doing some work with the school around how that all works, particularly given the roadworks that we've got in at the moment. That's created an opportunity to try some different approaches with the school as to how they're managing all of their activities. We did look at and impose a few stopping restrictions in and around that faux Palmerston probably earlier this year as well, just to help with the visibility getting in and out.
And there's been no overwhelming adverse feedback?
No.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. If there's nothing further on the Palmerston Anglesey, just carry on.
Thank you. So they're all of the sort of parking restriction items. The next ones, which start at item 24, are the traffic bylaw changes.
Chair, can I just ask a general question about streets that isn't covered in this report before you move on?
Yes.
And that is, are we facing increased challenges in some of our streets now with the new rubbish collection system, in the sense of these trucks being able to operate, you know, with their new, what do they use, those new things to flip the
Yeah.
things into, and particularly in cul-de-sacs and so forth, you know, where not only are they turning, but they're also trying to pick up bins, and there's the added challenge, I suppose, of cars being parked in those cul-de-sacs and in the turning part of those cul-de-sacs too.
I wouldn't say it's been a dramatic increase. We've always had a steady flow of one or two coming in each time. The refuse team have done a fantastic job working with the residents and have identified a lot of those streets where it's tight. I think in most cases residents are being clever about ensuring that on rubbish day that they're keeping it clear so that the truck can get in and around, so that they can enjoy the parking the rest of the time. So, yeah, we do have the odd one, but I wouldn't say there's been a huge...
there's not an avalanche of
No.
them. No, okay, that was my question, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. and Mrs. McRae's submission of,
They were coming in,
Yeah.
I understand, they were just coming in to support the proposed changes that we were putting in place. So it wasn't a specific item
right,
because we
so
hadn't had any
the contents
objections
of
to
their
it.
submission is on page 69, the written submission, so
So yes, basically we only detail in the report where we've had people object to what we're proposing, and we try and give a bit of a story. In this case, we had everyone in support, and they were wanting to come along and just show that support. But there was nothing in particular that needed to be covered off in that case.
Their final sentence, they're happy with the proposal as per the email they received, 16 to 22 Harley Street. So that's they're happy. Thank you. Okay, carry on.
So traffic bylaw changes. These are primarily just a further tidy up to make sure that the new arrangement that's been put in place in Tasman Road for the Rotokauri Transport Centre or Transport Hub work. The little road, connector road, Kiriwai, has only recently been named, so this has enabled us to tidy up the last few sections of the traffic bylaw, because prior to now it's been referred to as the new road. So this is primarily just formalising what's been considered previously at the August 2019 Hearings and Engagement Committee, and reconfirming exactly where the traffic can and can't go.
Questions? Robin, anything further? Sorry, Councillor Van Esten.
Yeah, we spoke just before the meeting started, Robin, just with regard to how you advise traffic of the limits within the particular areas, and if you could just let the meeting know that would be helpful.
So this is for this intersection?
Yeah.
So, so there will be a number of signs in the area, as shown on the plan actually in figure 5, which show the no right turn, no left turn, sorry, wrong way up, with the accept buses underneath, supplements, and we will at opening just have some people down there just explaining to those people who are not familiar. I think the big thing with this is it has been closed for quite some time for the work, so people have kind of developed a new habit of going around anyway, so that will deal with a large percentage of the problem.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Further questions? Anything further you want to add, Robin?
No, thank you.
Right, so as I understand it, bear with me and Amy will assist here. We have the staff recommendation, which is that the Hearings and Engagement Committee receives the report and approves the changes to parking restrictions and controls as set out below, and that is in the table which Robin has now worked through and briefed us on. And then you see approves the following addition to the traffic restrictions register, part 1, that's C, with regard to Tasman Road, Kitawai Drive, and approves the following addition to the turning movement register, the Hamilton traffic bylaw, as set out below, to come into effect when the new roundabout at the intersection Tasman Road and Kitawai Drive is complete and open, as per D and the attachment to D.
So can
Right, move Deputy Chair Wilson, seconded Councillor Pascoe.
Can I just note that there were amendments required within the schedule for Anglesea Street and Palmerston Street, as per what was discussed?
So I think
So
what
that
we
those
would do,
amended
assist
schedules?
me, Amy, we would say noting
Yes.
the amendments, what's the word, the relevant amendments
Amendments tabled at the meeting?
tabled at the meeting, and then what the motion would do, obviously, is that would then be added to the motion. If the mover and the seconder are happy with that approach.
That's the reduction of, just, sorry for a point of clarification, that's the reduction of the 4 parking on Palmerston.
Correct.
A net, yes.
Yep.
So it was going to be more, but we've reduced. Right, Councillor Wilson, as mover of the motion, we're in your hands.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, the comment I was going to make is I am fully supportive of intensification. I'm fully mindful that a consequence of intensification are these ongoing challenges to parking. But I'm also very supportive of staff using the required tools to limit parking and introduce no parking areas where there are points of significant safety issues and congestion. And my message, I guess, to homeowners and developers who either rent or buy, that they have to be mindful when moving into a new an area of intensification, that not every tenant in the building is going to be able to have their car and plus a car. We've got to try to encourage people to start thinking, actually, in these areas of intensifications, number 2 taxi, use your bike, use 1 car, because, you know, this is a clear indication of a city that's developing, and so, you know, people have to be mindful of that when they purchase or rent in these areas. It's all, if that would be my comment.
Second to Councillor Pascoe.
Yes, I would like to just add to Councillor Wilson's comments. I'm thinking here of Glenlyn Avenue and also the Link Road, which is one that's closer to where I live, where there has been an intensive development in a greenfield site there. And quite clearly there are more vehicles per unit than there is space on site. I just wonder whether, when we're granting resource consents, we need to, and this is not in this particular area, but perhaps we need to signal to the developers, particularly where these dwellings are being built and are likely to end up being rental dwellings, that that there will be or could be parking challenges as we move forward, and echoing Councillor Wilson's comment about alternative methods that the occupiers of those properties may need to make around, you know, using taxis or Ubers or bikes or scooters or other forms of transport to get to and from their properties. You know, I see this as becoming quite a significant problem as we move more and more towards infill housing, not only as it has appeared in the city centre, but it's now moving out into the suburbs and into greenfield sites too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just in addition to what's been said, I wanted to acknowledge the work Robin and your team have done. It's really good to see those as part of this pavement upgrade work that we're addressing safety issues in Palmerston Street. which I think are probably very much needed. And also providing a bit more priority for buses, because ultimately if we want people to actually, as Ewan said, kind of rely on these other forms of transport like buses, then we need them to be efficient. And so, yeah, I just wanted to really show my support for those changes. Cheers.
Councillor Van Easton.
Thanks very much, and I echo the words of both Sarah Thompson, Councillor Sarah, and other councillors in the chamber today in terms of the tip of the iceberg that this is becoming. It's particularly busy, if we're thinking about Palmerston Street, a particularly busy and challenging area with the growth that's already there and others that are coming. It's the site or the perimeter of one of our largest employers in the city, and so the consequence of commuter parking in that area is high. All of those side streets, and I use it often, I have whānau living in the area, are filled with both the schooling traffic and the hospital commuter parking. I've observed people waiting for the bus while it stops to let people on and off, and traffic can back up, but people are tolerant and they accept change when it happens on an incremental basis. And I think that that kind of strategy is a fine one, Robin, that you take up a more liberal approach and start to add to your yellow lines when needed is a good way to be able to respond to that, because as people and the area changes, so will the habits of people. I've had to turn around myself because of that closed road, and it's now becoming a habit for me to change that. Hopefully we can start to do that with some of that school traffic as we add infrastructure and encourage parents to get their children onto bikes and foot to be able to get to school. That will alleviate some of that. So the work, again, that you're doing in that area is commendable. But, you know, ultimately it's a consequence of our growing city, and that is by no means going to change. In fact, it will accelerate, and it's a challenge for all of us to be able to take up and find strategies in order to be able to work successfully with our traffic congestion and our residents. Kia ora.
Thank you. Obviously note the points that have been previously raised, and as I understand it, both GMs, Jen Baird and Eva Lisa, with Luke Dwyer and Robin, there was an issue of having a sort of a kind of a drop-in session where we had examples of developments that were potentially causing problems. Now, what I want to stress in public session is not for councillors to interfere in a due process, but we were looking at some of the consequential flows from development. And this does raise an issue with our long-term plan discussions of actually adequately resourcing both the departments that Robin does, if we want to actually look at our parking slow streets, but also very much in the city planning area around enforcement and inspections, because one of the factors, if we're talking about off-street parking, is an example where someone might get hypothetically approval for 6 units. They actually allow for, you know, 1 park off-street. Then, of course, we have the national plan where we don't even have to do that. But suddenly those 6 units mysteriously, with the input of sinks in all the bedrooms and the microwaves, turn into potentially not 12 people, 2 per unit, but maybe 30, because we move into this mysterious bedsit situation. So what I'm trying to paint here is the rigorous inspection process of managing that, because one of the flow-ons obviously is just going to be absolute mayhem, you know, if everyone, you know, has a car, and then of course those cars get parked onto grass verges because there's no stopping lines. So the one thing I would make an observation is I think we do need that session, because this is obviously a flow-on from our district plan, national policy statement. But one of the things I think we've got to look at is resourcing our people even to do after hours spot checks, to manage, some of those processes. And I think Councillor Van Oosten and all of you have, adequately identified that. It's how do you cope with higher density urban living, and it's not just traffic, it's obviously rubbish collection, recycling, all of that. So I think probably through the GM report, to infrastructure would be really good to, down the track, give us a consequential update of how some of these developments are, the impact that they're having. Right, thank you for that. If there's no further discussion, do you want to exercise your right to reply, Councillor Wilson? No. You don't? Thank you. Right, I will move the motion as per moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Pascoe. All those in favour will say aye. Those to the contrary, carried unanimously. Right, we now move on to item 7, Hamilton City Speed Limit Bylaw Register changes. Robin.
Thank you. So speed limit changes is a frequent event that we bring along to this committee. So we have our Hamilton Speed Limit Plan, which sets out our aspirations for speed limits throughout the city, and then we're progressively implementing that. Today we have 2 different speed limit proposals. One is for 3 locations for a 30k speed restriction, and these are located in around the new Rotokauri village area and reflect the nature of those streets that have been built and how we're intending for them to be used. The other sites, 5 sites, are new residential streets that have recently been or are about to be vested in the city, and in alignment with their speed management plan have been built and set up for a 40k speed restriction to be in place. So this is just the formalisation process needed to enable that to be an enforceable speed limit. And I'm happy to take questions.
Questions? I think the only question I would have is obviously, okay, I'll just ask mine, then I'll go to you, Councillor Sarah. Look, the issue, which is to me another LTP discussion, is you know how we use the word self-explaining streets, and we have a situation where around my personal experience of this, we have a 40k, totally support that, but the actual design of the street doesn't lend to that. So there's people who still, I don't think necessarily even deliberately, are inadvertently drifting back into the 50k. All these streets, basically, there's a structure that they are quite self-explaining. Have I got that right, Robin?
Yes, so through the regional infrastructure tech spec, the new streets are being built to that. Certainly in some of the older areas of the city, there is a potential that we need to go back and do some more reinforcement in those areas, and we're certainly happy to hear from residents or those people who see and experience the actual speeds in those areas to have a look at those, and it may be as simple as putting down some 40k speed restriction markings on the road are actually really effective, just to remind people.
Do you anticipate, again, I'm looking at Eva Lisa, General Manager, where would that kind of report go? Just obviously as a supplementary question, would that be coming into infrastructure? I'm talking about the sort of what we call the element of retrofit. We have an existing, as you've just discussed. What more do we need to do in areas where we have 40k, but the streets aren't necessarily, and because of budget, can't necessarily be made self-explaining in the immediate future?
So often we are able, like simple things like road marking, we're able to accommodate that quite quickly, and we do respond regularly to requests from residents in those areas. And we also then look at what opportunities there are for improvements through the sort of safety and walking, cycling type funds to look at. It may be some additional islands, it may be raised safety platforms and those sorts of things. So we basically use the feedback that we're getting from residents to help develop up that program each year.
So if I've got that right, the first aspect is through the budget, LTP, there's an allocation.
Correct.
And then so obviously there's a discussion around that during the LTP, and then the consequence from that is the flow, and I assume to probably the relevant committee, which would be infrastructure,
Yes.
where you bring back a report, you ask elected members and other people for feedback, and that's looking at how you're reinforcing speed limits.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so I think it was the May report to the Infrastructure Operations Committee, we had that long list of works that we were intending to deliver under the low cost, low risk program.
Thank you.
And certainly through the long-term plan, we're looking at funding for those sorts of activities continuing and potentially increasing.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Chair. And I was just wanting to follow on from your question. Robin, what work have we done to go back and measure the compliance with these speed limits? Have we seen, do we go back and see if there's been overall reduction, say, and longer term, say, do people get used to it, or do they start to speed up again in 6 months or a year's time?
So we do, in each of the safer speed areas, because we're looking at a collection of streets, at the beginning of the process, we kind of identify the main sort of routes through where we think the speeds will be higher. And based on those streets, we do before surveys, and then we do semi-regular after surveys. And in most cases, we had really good changes. In some areas, we found that going back and doing the 40k marking on the road was just the next step that we needed to do, and we actually got 2 or 3k reductions in speeds as a result of doing that. And as I said earlier, we're happy to respond to requests from residents where they've basically identified ongoing issues and have found that generally the marking of the 40 on the road actually works really well, because often it is people genuinely forgetting. And particularly, in the morning when you're starting from home, you won't actually see necessarily a 40k speed limit. You would have seen it coming into the area, but you wouldn't see it when you start your day. So just having those reminders, as well as some of the more physical work. So that's something that we've just progressively responded to. The difficulty we have with our speed surveys, they are the tubes. They're only a point on the road, and part of where we put them down is being able to secure them somewhere. It's not necessarily the optimal location where you're going to get speeds and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a mixture. Feedback and our observations, we're more than happy to go out and do a little bit more if we can within our existing budgets.
Thank you.
Further questions? If there are no further questions, I will be happy to... Sorry, Councillor Van Easton, question?
Just following on from Councillor Sarah, in terms of the self-monitoring, what kind of tools might be available for council to be able to use in regard to drivers identifying that they're driving over the limit?
So the two things. One is, so we obviously have speed signs, but experience shows that people don't really see many of the signs. They're busy looking for other things. And so that's where we've sort of created this sort of threshold treatment as people go into it, so that the area feels different. The 40k markings on the roads. So we did a lot of work with Dr. Sam Charlton from the Waikato University when we first started rolling out those speed limit areas. And what we did was, while we did the sort of threshold treatment as you turned into the street, we recognised that when you're doing that, as a driver, you're really busy looking for other turning vehicles, people walking across the street, those sorts of things. So you're very busy, and you don't necessarily spot that magic sign that's just there and amongst everything else. So we came up with the regime of then marking the 40k on the road about 50 to 100 metres in, which is where drivers have sort of dealt with all of those complex issues and are now concentrating on their driving. And then it's the physical work. So we tried to choose locations that where people were walking across the road. So it may be at an intersection popping some splitter islands, and it may be that there's a walkway or a park or something like that that generates. So we tried to put the work in so that it wasn't just about slowing cars down, which was kind of the old technique, was you went in and put a speed hump every 100 metres and it didn't matter, you know, what it related to, it was just popped in. We've tried to put the devices in that will actually make walking and cycling easier and also decrease the speeds in the area or help manage the speeds. And then there's being clever around how you manage your on-street parking. And our preference is not to just have one side of the street completely with no stopping, because that actually reduces the friction and means that people can travel quite quickly through there. We like to break it up a little bit so that you know, bunny hop or weave down the road. So it's sort of all of those combinations of things that we're trying to put to people. We also are progressively removing road marking in those areas, so the clean street type approach. And so things like giveaways, centre lines and those sorts of things are progressively let to wear out. We're not investing money in putting black paint on top of them. Black paint actually shows up better than normal paint in certain weather conditions, so we're just progressively letting them wear out so that they become more of those clean street sort of areas. But you know, we are always willing to go back and have a look and see if there's another little something that we can add to help in those areas, and that's where the feedback from the community is really important.
Thank you. And I notice sometimes when I'm driving, maybe it's on highways, there's a radar that tells me how fast I'm going.
Yes, yes.
Have we got any of that kind of infrastructure available to us?
Yes, so
or is-
the permanent ones are called SIDs, speed indicator devices. So we've got a few of them around and we tend to use them on our arterial networks. We've had them in River Road, for example, in a lot of places. We also have speed trailers, and we, Daniel back here, manages, again through the request for service process, we find putting those trailers into the community and they actually give you that feedback. They've worked really well, so we've got several of them that we pop around the place. We've got a fairly regular routine that they pop around to known sort of hotspots, but we can always pull them off and put them into new areas. We utilise them, you know, when school starts back at the beginning of the term, particularly the beginning of the year, we get them out and remind people around speeds. The difficulty we have at the moment is our variable speeds around schools, so we're just trying to see what clever technology we can get to enable the trailer to actually talk to those variable speed limits. But yes, so that's another one of the tools that we are using.
Great. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to move the staff recommendation as per...
Second?
Sorry? Seconded by Councillor Thompson, so that's the staff recommendation as per page 49, receives the report, approves the following changes to Hamilton City Speeds Bylaw 2018 registered, amends the following speed limit, and that's obviously under Register 14, Register 3, Register 4, and that takes us right through to the bottom of page 50. Page 49 and 50. I will so move. Seconded by Councillor Thompson. I don't have anything. I think the questions that have just been asked, and we certainly look, if you like, we look forward to the really good discussion around, you know, the quote self-explaining streets and what other measures we can have. 20-minute city safety, because obviously this is also about safety for cyclists, pedestrians, for residents, and obviously looking to the GM, we're really going to be welcoming, you know, that appropriate elected member session drop in whatever, just as we pursue the, you know, the broader picture. Seconder, do you have anything to say, Councillor Thompson? No. Debate, discussion. Right, Councillor Pascoe, we're just in the process of moving the staff recommendation as per page 49 and 50. There's no further debate. I will put all those in favour, please say aye. Those to the contrary, the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move on to item 8, which is the temporary road closures for Bridge to Bridge Ski Race 2020 Show and Shine. And that is on page
65. 65.
Page 65. Robin, we're in your hands.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. So this item is one that we aim not to have to bring to you. The ability to temporarily close roads for events is set up legally through the Transport Vehicular Traffic Road Closures Regulations from 1965, so an oldie but a goodie. But that does require us to do a public advert of that proposed closure at least 42 days prior to the event. Every now and then we have an event organiser who misses that requirement, and so then we deal with it under the Local Government Act 1974, which enables us to bring it through to a committee. So this is for the show and shine display of the boats that are then going to take part in the bridge to bridge ski race the following 2 days. And it's basically closing Hood Street to enable those boats to be parked up and everyone to go and have a good look at them. The process requires us to do a public notice to say that the meeting today will consider this closure. We also have to contact Waka Kotahi and New Zealand Police. So both of those organisations have replied and are happy to support it. And then depending on the decision that is made today, we will then put a further public notice advertising the outcome of today's meeting.
So as a
Happy to answer
normal
any questions.
procedure, you know, when you say public notice, is that also targeted at the businesses that?
So there is a requirement on the applicant to have done the door knocking
and you
and
check
to
that.
have worked with the Hood Street operators, obviously. In this case, being the sort of thing it is, I'm sure the business operators are quite happy because there's an opportunity to bring in a lot of people.
Yeah, what they lose in vehicles, they're going to get in foot traffic big time.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Any further questions on that? Councillor Wilson, do you want to move? And who would like to second that? Councillor Van Easton. So that's that the Hearings Engagement Committee receives a report. Here we go. That the Hearings Engagement receives a report, approves the closure of Hood Street between Alexander and Victoria with regard to Friday 6th of November, and C, approves notice of decision to be issued stating Council's decision. So that's as per the staff recommendation on page 65, which has been moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Van Easton. Discussion?
Very brief.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. I think these types of things are a really useful tool that council has to promote small and boutique types of annual events that attract people into our entertainment and food centre point, if you like. These are good economic stimulants. They add to the welfare of a city, you know, the upbeat feeling of a city. And so I think this is great.
Okay. Further discussion?
Just to add to Councillor Wilson's comments, it's a great example for the business owners to be able to observe the benefits of disallowing traffic through an area and of the foot traffic that might result from such an event, and the ongoing and subsequent economic benefit for themselves in that. And I talked earlier about changing behaviours, and this is a really great way in order to be able to perhaps trial some of that in other places. Kia ora.
Thank you. Further discussion? Right, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, I'll do the hand raise this time. Amy, probably it's better we do the hand raise. I don't want to go onto the machine when there's only 4 of us, but probably just raise your hands, just so we've got that. Right, thank you. That is carried unanimously, and that brings to a close the Hearings Engagement Committee meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you, team, for your attendance, and Robin, to you and your team, obviously, for what has been a continuous presence at the bottom of the table, given all the issues you've been putting in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you.